morning, everyone. My name's Garo. Welcome to the Java Energy Hour. A lot to get to in terms of the WNBA, what we saw last night with Caitlin Clark, the Indiana Fever. And I think we're seeing how, in general, this rookie class is starting to come into form. And we can now have reasonable conversations and reasonable expectations in terms of what to expect from this group of young players, young professionals. And so we're going to touch on that. A little bit of a Dallas Mavericks Boston Celtics preview. Excited for that. We're waiting to see. Hopefully we get Joe with us here shortly. But if not, no worries. We will press on. First and foremost, it goes without saying. Night's NBA. Oh, and speaking of Joe, welcome, Joe. How are you this morning, this beautiful morning, fresh off of open?
I'm breathing. That's the best I got for you.
Well, we'll keep that up if you don't mind. Um, I I was going to touch on this. It goes without saying. I mean, the Minnesota Timberwolves. What was that first half? But that I before I give too much of my 2 cents, kind of your takeaways from the Timberwolves last night in particular and the series in general.
Well, basically, how I view the playoffs. I forget who I got it from, but it actually stands to reason that this is usually the delineation on how you get the 4 wins in the postseason. I think a coach can get you a win. I think your role players can get you a win. But then I think that your star players um, carries you to two. And that equals the four you need to win a playoff series. This particular game was what I like to call the follow me game. Um, and it's basically when your star players set out from the outset, follow me, and I will carry you to this victory. And that's exactly what Luka did in that first quarter, outscoring the complete Timberwolves team um, by himself. And I do believe that Kyrie and him together outscored the whole Timberwolves team in the first half. Um, Now, did they come out in the second half and try to make something happen? Yeah, sure. I mean, you could say that because they outscored the Mavs, but um, game was well in hand by then, and they did the majority of their damage to come out early and just put it away early, which is funny because the kiss of death that has become Charles Barkley's predictions. Shout out to Drake. Um, he uh, he said that he expected the Timberwolves to come in and blow out the Mavericks in their pregame show on Inside the NBA, and it was the exact opposite. Um, but yeah, basically that's kind of how I view every series. There's always going to be like that role player that gets you a game not out of surprise because that kind of I feel like that uh, doesn't get the proper props to those bench players. I think they're very valuable, and the others are very important. But there's always a game where you look back and say, "Oh yeah, that's the game that Derek White went off," or that's the game that um, PJ Washington went off, and the bench will get you a game. Um, Coaching will get you a game, whether it's some switch in the lineup or some late game call on a play in the sideline out of bounds, um, some adjustment that they made from a previous game. Coaching will get you one, and then your stars get you two. And this is one of the star games that ended up closing out the series for them.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Joe. Sorry, I mean, I do a couple podcasts a day, and you and me are both busy doing something. So pardon me if I've got you confused with someone else's statements. But I believe you and me have both been on the train of Karl-Anthony Towns needs to be more aggressive and needs to attack the paint. And for sure, the game was out of hand. But in my eyes, to show I'm fair, I actually liked how Karl-Anthony Towns played in large part yesterday. He wasn't the main problem. And you know what this shows to me? That the part of the reason why I was so pissed off of watching him play, it shows that he knows how to do this. He can play at a level that suits his strengths, mainly his size, and that he can be a force around the rim while then stepping back and hitting threes as needed. So for me, this shows that he can do it, and in my opinion, he did have the right mindset. So this loss, I don't want to go so far as to say he's redeemed himself, but in my eyes, this is something of a all right, Karl-Anthony Towns, this I could work with. Am I misreading this?
Uh, no. I think he put two of his best back-to-back games in this series, with last game and this game here. 1 out of 6 you don't love, but you'd love the 6 compared to the 14 he took from inside the arc. So the ratio
Yes.
I can live with, and he got to the line 10 times. So um, that's basically what we've wanted, is at least some sort of efficiency. And 20 attempts versus 28 points is more along the lines of what we're looking for as far as efficiency, shot attempts versus points. Uh, this for me was, you can't let a team of this nature in this stage of the series get up that high in halftime. Now we have seen what could appear to be insurmountable odds, such as this. Um, uh, we've seen the other team come back from it. The only problem with how the Timberwolves, because of how the Timberwolves came out, there just wasn't enough from the others,
Yes.
to kind of like outweigh, what the Dallas starters did to them. And I can. It's obviously easy to say in hindsight, but I mean that's what you do when the game's over already. But you got a Nas Reed who goes 2 for 10, 0 for 4 from three. Kyle Anderson 3 for 9. McDaniels, who I thought needed to have a really huge game, to kind of offset what I thought Towns was going to do. He kind of ends up having the impact that Cat usually has, which is unfortunate. I mean, he got you a couple of blocks. With the amount of shots he took, he good percentage, right? 5 fouls though, right? So you wonder if that had played a part into it. He played 21 minutes. Um, uh, so that foul trouble definitely impacted them. Out of all the starters, he had the best plus minus while he was out there on the floor. So they definitely missed him out there when he was fighting through that foul trouble. So um, they need, when you get to this stage of the game and you're fighting for your playoff lives, you don't have the luxury of not having one asset not come through for you. You need everything to be working for you. You need your
Hmm.
stars to be working for you. You need your coach to make the right calls, and you need your others to step up. In this particular game, at this particular stage, unfortunately, the others did not provide enough supplemental um, scoring for them to overcome the odds.
And I want to give you credit. Yesterday we were on shout out to Scoutcast Sports Hub at Scoutcast underscore Sports Hub on YouTube. Check out Eroc's channel. So we were both on there yesterday. You were more brave than I was. You took the Mavericks money line. I just took them plus 4.5. I don't think we saw that first quarter though. I don't think anyone saw that first quarter the way it unfolded. So to you, was it more just Luka Doncic being amazing and then just being too much in terms of a shell shock, or does it speak to the Timberwolves long term? So how do you kind of explain how that first quarter happened?
Well, I mean, I tweeted right after that first half, one word: leadership. Um,
Hmm.
that's basically, my faith was in the leadership of those two versus Karl-Anthony Towns and an Anthony Edwards. And it's been clear to me through this series and basically the whole Dallas run. You're looking at a team that stars have been there and they have done it. Kyrie Irving is a champion. Luka Doncic is gone far in the playoffs. He's been to this exact stage before, it just not been able to get it done because the pieces around him maybe have not been enough um, for him to get past the Western Conference Finals. Um, but this for me was the expectation. As far as how big the lead was, I maybe didn't expect that. I'd be lying if I said I expected the game to be essentially over at halftime. But what I did expect this game to be was a follow me game.
Hmm.
This was a game that I expected a closeout game. Um, it was going to be a follow me game. It was going to be the two stars telling the squad with their play very early to follow us, and we're going to get this matchup against the Celtics. And that's pretty much exactly what they did. But also shout out to them. Um, they held Minnesota to 40 points at halftime. And for a
Yeah.
team that had, leading up to maybe halfway through the season, um, not as stout defensively as you would like to see in a potential championship contender. And this speaks to the additions that they've made this season in a PJ Washington, in a Daniel Gafford, and their draft pick Derek Lively. Shout out to the tank session last year when it wasn't working out. That tank section actually netted them a Derek Lively. So um, maybe the fine was justified given where they're at now. But that's just me. Shout out to them. Great timing if you're gonna tank it. Um, but yeah, that speaks to the amount of
Hmm.
and also something that you mentioned, the improvement in Doncic and Irving defensively. There's been a lot of press conferences at the end of the game where Irving speaks to his effort defensively and the importance of their effort defensively as a whole, the team as a whole. You're holding. You can check me if I'm wrong. The league average is at least around 110. Did Minnesota top that at any point during the series, even in their wins? I'd argue that their defense has been pretty solid throughout this series, and they're going to need it against Boston.
Hmm. Well, Joe, it's like you've done this before. That's exactly what we're about to talk about next. I mean, it makes sense. We kind of have to now. We know June 6th. They made sure that we knew on the broadcast that it was June 6th that it's starting, regardless of anything else. But kidding aside, I think this is the matchup we all wanted. I really do. I'm excited for it. Now the Dallas Mavericks and I think the Boston Celtics are going to be favored. Dallas Mavericks, do they make this a series? Will it be interesting? And more importantly, would you be shocked if they won it all?
I would not be shocked if they won it, to be honest. Now, so this is the first time Luka is going to be here. But again, like Irving's a champion, and if anyone can speak to what the scenario is going to be like, there's and I say this a lot about a team that maybe has one or two players going into this situation, um, while like the rest of the team, it's like their first time. Um, there are a couple of more things that there's a little bit more eyes on the series because it is the finals. There's a little bit more kind of like those media obligations during this time of season becomes very important. Access, the whole hoopla pregame. There's a little extra juice when it's the championship series. This is another level that they're going to need to rise to. Um, the core of Boston has actually done this dance before. Now they didn't win it when they got there. Shout out to the 2020 Warriors, or the whenever it is they won. But they've they've kind of been to this particular dance before. Um, so I'm very interested in seeing how they come out in their first two games. Just because I think they're going to want to set a tone that these aren't your Celtics of yesteryear, so to speak, in the sense of the previous iteration of this team that didn't get it done the last time around. Um, which even if they won the first two games, I obviously are going to need to see more from them than that, um, because they did do that the last time they were here, and they subsequently lost the rest of the games. So, um, yeah, it's gonna be very very interesting. It's gonna be obviously I don't want to make predictions, but I can very easily see uh if Dallas picks up one of those first two games in Boston, I can very easily see how this can get pretty dicey for the
Hmm.
Celtics, especially since they do have a tendency to kind of throw one of those first two home games. Um, but I mean, they've done it during this playoff run and made it out the other end. So maybe this is just a new vibe for them this year. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, the flavor of the day, Joe. You know how it is.
Yeah.
I, I mean, it's pretty clear where I stand on both teams, I think, so I'm not going to repeat that. I will say I'm looking forward to this matchup of Tatum Brown and Irving Doncic. If we now go to tertiary, and that means third for anyone who doesn't know, if we're going to that, then I like Drew Holiday as the best third option on either team, I think. And so that could be what puts Boston over the edge in terms of all those concerns you just said from past experiences. Right now, everyone's favoring Boston to win, and it would make sense. My big issue, though, Joe, I lied. I lied. I'm going to repeat myself. They haven't been tested this postseason enough for me against a full squad, against a full strength team, in my opinion. Not really my opinion. Jimmy Butlerless, Tyrese Halliburton when it mattered most, and Donovan Mitchell when it mattered, well, toward the end of that series. And they were able to scale through the regular season a little. I just, overall, I like this Dallas, how they've come into this NBA Finals series. That's where I'm right now. If you ask me, I had to look at the freaking date today, Joe. If you ask me, May 31st, that's
Best in
that's
May.
where I'm kind of leaning. Still in May, not June yet,
Yeah.
Joe. Um, is there something valid to what I'm saying? Do you think it's what do you think, Joe?
Um, I guess. I mean, I was going to make the argument that I wasn't as worried as a lot of the people that have been speaking on Boston's chances during the series as far as what they've done so far this postseason. But I can't really say that because my argument for the Mavs winning is because of who they've had to beat to get here. Um, so that would spit in the face of that argument that I'm not worried about. Um, the Celtics' road. Um, I personally just I would love to see Tatum and Brown win it just because they've been kind of dealing with the narrative that the two of them maybe don't work, that they've been doing this dance long enough where they should have one already. And I would hate for the narrative after this year to be like, oh, do they still work, not work? Um, because I don't believe those things. I do believe that they do work, and I do believe that them as a tandem will eventually win the championship. Um, I just really really like what I'm seeing from the Mavericks. This is a matter of just really liking their road to the playoffs. Really, just players that just know themselves, who they are as a player, who they need to be for their team. I'm just honestly in love with what I've seen Irving in this whole postseason, and his press conferences, and just like he was on he was on a Sports Center after the game and spoke with Scott Van Pelt, and um the whole he didn't directly ask the question, but he kind of alluded to Irving's past in Boston and how it's going to be like going over there and having to go through that team um, with core players that he played with when he was over there. How it's going to be to have to go through them to win another championship, and he just kind of like very just calmly just expressed, a brief sentiment on his time there and what he was going through off the court, passing in his family during that time period and just things he wasn't mentally ready for at that point in time. And I just think he's just a different person this year. I think, he's really just locked in, but has like the proper perspective as to his role on this team as a leader, as a person that you want to follow. The argument on Kevin Durant's post Warriors was leadership, and could he lead a team to a championship without having a Steph Curry, without having a Klay Thompson, having it be his show. And Kyrie is just of the mindset that, man, bump all of that. Listen, Luka's here. I'm here. I've been to the promised land. It's been 7 years since I've been in the finals. I'm perfectly comfortable with who I am in the grand scheme of things in basketball, my place in it, who I am as a person. He's in such a comfort level, and that's going to do wonders for Luka, because this is going to be his first time here, and Kyrie's going to be able to just lock in and just help this team win 4 games. He's not going to be worried about anything off the court. He's not worried about how he's seen by the media, how the media feels about him and all that kind of jazz. He's just locked in, and a locked in Kyrie Irving with a Luka Doncic, who may be arguably second best player of the world, maybe after this finals, if he wins a championship, maybe we have a discussion between him and God help me out, Denver Nuggets, Jokic. It's so early
I
for me,
believed
bro.
in you. I believed
It's
in
so
you.
early.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe you have that argument after the season if he wins a championship, but like to know that his number 2 is just in such a place with himself, he's not going to have to worry about having help, because his help's going to be there. And then the only thing you just really worry about is can the others come through and get you that one game? Can the coaching come through and get you that one game? Kyrie and Luka are going to get you 2, at least. There's going to be some follow me games where the 2 of them just outplayed Tatum and Brown, and they get you a couple of games. So if you figure if you do that for both teams, and say, okay, Brown and Tatum can get you 2, and then Kyrie and Luka, they'll get you 2, then it becomes, okay, which coaching staff and which bench or which others can get you those other 2 games. And J Kidd, Missoula, I might give the edge to J Kidd if we're being honest. Just based on just mindset, like basketball IQ, like Kidd's been out there. Kidd himself has been out there and won a championship as a player. So I just think he just has a connection, especially with those 2 as point guards in this league. Like I feel like I might give the edge to Kidd. Even though this is his first dance here as a coach, he's been there as a player. So I trust in that, him being able to get you that 3rd game. And then as far as the others is concerned, your Lively's, your PJ Washingtons, your Gaffords, I just feel like Dallas is a deeper team with their others. I think Boston's more front loaded in comparison to what we're seeing with the Mavericks. And as far as like the defensive matchup itself, Holiday's a great defensive player, but if they're gonna put him on Doncic, that's a big dude. Like, and Shaq said this in the Shaq said this in his kind of like analysis at the end of the game. You know, the kind of early look at the finals. He said he's looked at Doncic in person, and after seeing him like for this entire series, he's like, he's much bigger than I thought he was. And he doesn't believe Holiday has the size to contend with that. And then also thought, they're not going to want to put Tatum on him because they don't want to put Tatum in a position where he's Anthony Edwards and having to guard one of the best players as well as have to have an offensive output, especially when his offensive output's been already sketch as it is during this postseason. He's afraid of putting Tatum on him. And so, who then do you put on? I just think Doncic is going to be a problem for that backcourt more than coming into the series.
I like what you said a little earlier, especially Joe, in that this is one of the rare finals where if you're a neutral fan or just a fan of basketball, I think you're mostly okay with either team winning because you either get the growth and development of Irving or Doncic, or that same growth and development of Tatum and Brown. And I kid about this a lot, but we do support growth here. So it really would be like a nice capping event for either pair of stars or
Absolutely.
either team. So I'm gonna take this one step further than what you even did. So I'm curious. I'm using you as like a gauging to see if I'm insane or not. We'll TBD. But very hard to argue that the Timberwolves don't have a great front court, right? And we saw how the Dallas Mavericks front court ended up matching up with them. I for sure love the Dallas front court against the Boston front court overall. And I think that's an area on both ends where we can see them have their ways on some nights and potentially get that third game like what you're alluding to. Am I out of my mind?
No. Now we do have to obviously note that this week is obviously, and he's already, I don't know if he tweeted out, but I read something somewhere that Porzingis like put out into the universe, hey, I'll see you next week. So we
Mhm.
do have a great idea that that Porzingis is going to be available and healthy and ready to go um, on on that first game on the 6th. But that being said, I also don't love the depth on their front court. Um, I will say that they can now go back to having Horford on the bench, and so now you're basically kind of rotating um, like their three in the front court. And I hesitate to say front court because Tatum's really kind of like
Yeah.
really a three playing a four. Um, just based on how the lineup works out to have Brown and Tatum in the lineup at the same time with their two defensive guards. Um, that kind of like rotation, Tatum, Horford, um, Porzingis. Tatum's been there and done that. Horford's been there and done that. Porzingis, this is kind of like his really first foray into like hardcore being, one of the major focal points. I think what I worry about with him, he's coming off that health situation. So reps. He hasn't been around. He hasn't had game. Is he in game shape? You don't really get in game shape with simulated workouts and certain
Mhm.
practices. So that's going to affect how he's going to be in for at least the first couple of games. Now, once it goes back to Dallas, he's probably in a groove now. There's more time also in between games. I think the biggest distance in between games is 2 days, and then or like the lowest time frame is 2 days. The other differences in game to game is at least three. So there's going to be plenty of time in between to kind of like really narrow in on adjustments that you need to make, or if a guy is banged up, getting him a little bit healthier. There's a lot more time in between the finals games to get yourself right to the next game. So I do love that. I do love that, especially for him. Um, if he's going to be like easing his way into the series, but because he hasn't played and because it's been a while since he's played, those first two games, we may not see the best of him. And that's going to make it very, very a whole lot easier for Dallas, especially with Boston's history and giving up a game at home. It's going to make it even more um, easy for them, or likely for them to get one of those first two games in Boston, which sets the series up much differently, giving them kind of like that home court. So that's what I worry about with like the front court in general. Lively missed one game and he was back out there. So like I do definitely trust a kind of like a Lively Gafford try that those two more than I do trust Porzingis and Horford
Mhm.
at the five.
And Horford could end up, not even kidding about this, Horford could end up being that other that we talk about. He had a little bit of a resurgence um in the wake up to the in the Pacers series. And then who'd they play before? Who'd Boston play before? Help me out. Was it the Sixers? No.
No. Indy played Sixers.
Uh oh my god, I'm blanking.
I'm also blank.
We'll get an executive producer on that. But either way, in the road up to there, he was kind of impressing me. Horford was in terms of Cavs.
Yeah, there you go.
He played a pretty big role in some games where Tatum and Brown weren't playing well. Horford did, and White obviously, but Horford especially could be one of those X factors who you talked about earlier. Let's move on to the WNBA. Now, Joe, I'm gonna need you to hear me out on this. And as much as possible, like I don't know, right? I don't know how much this is a reality, given the topic. But as much as possible, I try to stick with just basketball when it comes to Caitlin Clark and her WNBA impact, right? For obvious reasons, but mainly because I think what's been said is a larger recycled now at this point. But in terms of basketball, here's what I see as the Indiana Fever lost last night, and I've watched not all their games. I think I've watched all but two of their games. To me, it looks like they're stuck between trying to run a professional offense, a WNBA offense, and running what worked in Iowa for Caitlin Clark. And at times when they move away from that, when they do play a more collective offense, the ball doesn't stick as much. Others are more involved, and you see real potential, particularly when you can kick out and get others in more of a rhythm. At the same time, just in my opinion, I don't necessarily love the shot selection from Caitlin Clark. Can she make those? Yes, but she looks tired. She looks frustrated. And I don't see if this is the path where they're kind of torn between are we just running a Caitlin Clark centric offense and an actual more at and of course there are going to be times where of course you say Caitlin go cook. Of course, I'm not saying that at all. But the emphasis and what you come into the arena with your focus on, I see a big issue right now for this Indiana Fever team. And then my final note before I hand it off to you is everyone says she has good vision, and she does. She's a good passer. But I almost don't want to see teams doubling her as much. I'd rather get herself worked up when through the non-foul calls and don't give her those easy passes through doubling. Of course, you want to give her different looks throughout the game. So again, not saying to never double her. But I think teams are almost giving her too much credit by doubling when they do, and then she has those easier like passes that end up leading to easy buckets down low. So I'm saying a block there. Tell me kind of what you're thinking, Joe. Am I impressed with Caitlin Clark? Absolutely, but these are just my areas of concern, and particularly on the defensive end. I mean, come on, she's getting cooked.
Well, I mean, here's the thing, right? Welcome to the W, right? They've and listen, she came into the league with a lot of fanfare. I understand that a lot of eyes are on her. I understand that a lot of credit is being given to her role in bringing more eyes to women's basketball as a whole. I get all that. Um, what what I don't like is almost every time I see uh, in like the press conferences or in media obligations that's being done. And I'll follow this up with an example from Breanna Stewart yesterday, but um, she's such a topic of conversation that every time another athlete in the W is interviewed, like she somehow comes up um, as far as like the story of the season and all that kind of jazz. Breanna Stewart was on the Pat McAfee show yesterday, and I so believe it or not, I understand why she comes up there, just because Pat went to one of those Liberty Fever games, because show's based in Indy, so they're a season ticket holder. In support of the W and in support of Caitlin. And basically there's, just a couple of questions there where it's just like, all right, yeah, I get it. I guess I get it. And then obviously they, get back towards, which I'm sure is going to be a conversation either now or later, as far as the 3v3 league. I just feel like so much attention is on it that, I mean, why not make her every single night just make it the worst experience she could possibly have every game? That's what I'm looking at. I look at a person who's literally like the Sparks guard. Literally, she takes a free throw and goes right to face guard the mess out of her, and she had a second free throw to take. That's how locked in on her they are. And she just like raises her hands like, yo, check, you got another free throw. Like, get off of me. Was like the look that Clark said I had on her face. She's like, get off me, please. Let me live. Let me breathe. And that's the energy she gets every night out there. And you know how I know this? You want to know how I know this? She's averaging 5.7 turnovers a game. And that's how I know that they are on her like white on rice every single game that she plays. She is the focal point, and if you're going to treat her like the focal point, the opposing teams will too. And as far as the note that you made that, you don't really love that they're giving her so much attention just based on her shot selection or just based on how much she's struggling, I'd argue they should keep that going because clearly it's working. They are 1-9. So I would
fair.
expect them to continue to do that because they're if it ain't broke,
Fair.
they'll fix it. But yeah, I mean I don't mind it, like her being the focal point in the sense that she came in with that fanfare and the expectations were that, if they were to draft her, I'm sure that, their inner workings, their, collective thought, okay, she's going to be the face of the franchise. This is why we're doing this. But I thought that this was going to be like a really like kind of like dynamic duo pairing with Aaliyah Boston. And what I'm not seeing is a jump from year one to year two for Boston. I'm not seeing kind of like that ascension in the second season and improvement from last year to this year. And I think a lot of that is attributed to where, she was the incumbent last year. She was the, who they thought that they were going to run things through last year. And then that led to a, less than, stellar season. But I mean, it was her rookie season, right? So like, um, kind of like a lot to carry as far as the franchise is concerned, to expect that, she's going to be, Asia Wilson or something, 20-10, and, carrying the team to the playoffs. Um, I think my expectation was that the two of them would share kind of like that responsibility and just kind of ascend together. And there are games where I'm watching like Boston's lack of involvement in what's going on, and I'm just like, okay, I understand Clark being the central option and all that kind of jazz, because that's what she was in Iowa, and she's scored very prolifically. But I mean, there are other players on this team, right? Like I feel like, and I don't say that to say that that they don't have like balanced scoring. I mean, if you look at their scoring, amongst their starters, like it's fairly even, to be honest. There's no like really huge separation, but I also attribute that to her Clark shooting like 37%. So that's part of it. She makes more shots. She's probably in the 20s in scoring. But that's the only thing that I kind of like hedge on, is that I don't think they have their offensive scheme figured out to a point where they're playing to all of their strengths. I think they're playing to
Mhm.
feed Caitlin, and she's trying to do everything, but like 5.7 turnovers a game is kind of ridiculous. Like that's a lot. Um, but I mean, I'd attribute that to her having the ball so much, right? So I mean, do
Right.
you really want? I think it would behoove them to have a more balanced approach, as far as to how their offenses run, and take advantage of all the assets you have, is the only thing that I'd say, and that would cut down on her turnovers, expose her less, and also get the others involved more, to where when you get to late game scenarios, maybe she has a little bit more juice. Maybe she, if she lets the others cook more, get them involved first, and then get hers late game, I'd be more into that being the strategy, as opposed
Yes.
to her trying to score, 5-6 points a quarter, and try to get to a number at the end of the game. And I'm not saying that's what they're doing, but I'm saying that they're exposing her um, too much as a focal point when they have others capable of getting going.
Which is why I have this as my comparisons for right now. And again, this is just a strictly basketball conversation. So in terms of Aaliyah Boston, I see her. People are saying unfairly saying that she's letting the Indiana Fever down. She's not having the touches that she's used to in this offense at all. Right now, she has almost a Clint Capella role to me, where it's like, go crash the boards, give us second chances. Good luck, you got this. And then in terms of Caitlin Clark, right now I see it more as a Trey Young role in terms of, hey, if you go off for 30, great, but you're also just as likely to get an efficient 20 with 8 turnovers. And so long term, and she's frustrated. The team is frustrated. The coach is getting teed up. Like this is for this year. I guess it could work, right? Caitlin Clark, she's here. But for year 2, year 3, year 4, this will not work at all. So I hope they figured it out in terms of offense. My other NBA rookie comparisons. Um, Cameron Brink, I'm a liking to a young Anthony Davis right now, right? Really great anchor of a defense, limited offensively, but you see the potential, you see further room for growth, which we support here, of course. And then finally, last but not least, Angel Reese. I don't necessarily have a comp for her yet, but this is more just me describing what I'm seeing. A force down low is composed as hell. I like her low post presence, especially in terms of overall impact. She's right now having a greater impact on, and both her, Clark, and Brink are all playing on bad teams. So I think this is a pretty nice apples to apples comparison overall. So I think this three-way rookie race right now, I've said I have Angel Reese 1, Caitlin Clark 2, and Cameron Brink a little more distant 3. Let me know. Love it, hate it, anything in between. Joe, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, so Brink is in a situation where she doesn't have to be the person, right? They got Hamby there, Lexi Brown there, Kia Nurse. Um, she doesn't have to be the all encompassing, like she doesn't have to be Caitlyn there, right? Like she can play her role. Um, I I feel like she does get into like foul trouble a lot. Um,
Yes.
I don't know if that's me, but I feel like she's averaging at least 4 fouls a game, which in her position on the court, 4 or 5, wherever you're playing her, exposes her to a lot. I do love what she's bringing to the team defensively, though. Getting key blocks in situations. I think in a late game scenario, she had like 2 blocks in the same possession to help preserve the win for the Sparks. I do love that activity, but she's also not asked to do the things that Caitlin Clark is asked to do, albeit to the team's detriment, I think, because there are other players there capable of putting up points there. So I think I understand statistically and just basically what we're watching her being the third. But I just love her situation. Like I love that she's not because of what's around them there. I do love that she's not basically exposed to having to be. She gets to ease in to
Yes.
what's going on, and I love that for her. Um, Now, as far as Reese is concerned, um, man, so she's coming in with some energy. She's coming in and doing exactly what's being asked of her. Um, I believe they had a game against them recently, the Sparks, and they won by like 10 points. Um, Also, a situation where the offensive options like when you have a Mabry, when you have an Evans, taking a majority of the shots, the balls are in their hands. Like they're not necessarily, um, running things explicitly for her. And with her minutes, she's doing a little bit of everything. She's getting a couple of steals, a couple assists, doing what she can on the boards. I love her activity. She arguably could have done more in that Sparks game, but I think she also ran into foul trouble herself in that game. Um, I do love that she does have a Cardoso there too, who is going through literally the same experience she is, so they can lean on each other, especially their kind of like aggression, their like fire. They have a similar fire there. And that's kind of like what I guess that's what like they envisioned when they drafted the both of them, is just having that fire, that connectivity. Um, I think I love that situation for her. So I honestly, again, I don't mind that being the number two, the who you see, kind of like in that realm as well. I can't really argue with anything that you said. Clark being two, just production wise, what's being asked of her, get that. But like record wise, it really kind of sets her back, because while she is doing some good things on the team, it's not leading the wins right now, and that is partly due to her inefficiency, struggles with the physicality that she's combating every day. And like I said, I've cited that example with the Sparks player. Literally, she's like, "Forget the second free throw. I'm face guarding. I got Caitlin tonight. I need to get back on D." That's the kind of attention she has on the court, and that's every night. That is every night she's on the court. They are on her. Um, and they're just not going to let her. They're not going to let her just do what she wants out on the court. So, listen, it's what, a 40-game season. They got games to figure it out. And if it's not this year that they ascend to the playoffs, then that's fine. Boston's a second-year player. She's a rookie. These are the growing pains you go through once you get to the league. And the what's going to be really key for them, honestly, um, that break for the Olympics. I forget how long it is, but there's going to be an amount of time where um, there's going to be a break for the women's squad to go to the Olympics, and then they're going to pick back up afterwards. Um, that's going to be some time to kind of like digest where she's at as a player. Um, kind of like can really take in everything that's happened so far, and I'd be very interested to see how the team looks after that break when they're able to pause, take a step
Mm.
back, look at things with a set of binoculars, and really just kind of like dive in on an intimate level as to what they see. How can we be better? um, how can we coach better? How can we scheme better? um, to kind of make this a more balanced team, a more efficient team. How do we limit the turnovers? How do we defend without fouling? All that kind of jazz. And I'd like to see, however many games that is after that break, I'd like to see what their record is in that time.
Hmm. And I think that's more than fair in a rookie season. So I'll be honest, Joe, I'd forgotten about the Olympic break. So good call on your part. Good call. Um, Case in point, this just goes to show, regardless if it's on the men's side, women's side, whether it's lacrosse, basketball, whatever, taking that jump from an amateur level slash college level to the pros, it's always going to be difficult, regardless. Case in point, Nika Muhl doesn't come off the bench until deep into garbage time. And she's the one who's guarding Caitlin Clark in the Final Four not a month ago. So she's not even making the court. So, and we're seeing all these other players who are now not struggling, but they are struggling in terms of adjusting to that next level. And so we need to be patient. There's room, there 100% is room for growth. And I'd forgotten that you basically get a halftime on the season this year for the WNBA. So I think that'd be more than fair. This is a learning experience. From then on, just reevaluate. So really, really nice stuff today, Joe. Joe, that's all I've got. That's all we've got for today. I'll tune in later on. I got a show 4 p.m. and then E-Rock has a show probably at 5 p.m. on the Scoutcast Media Hub. Anything else you'd like to plug in the meantime? Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, you can obviously find me at Java Joe Sports on the X. Definitely have my ears to the pavement as to what's going on in all leagues. Tough loss for my Rangers last night. We need to figure out between now and next game how to get more shots up than the other squad. I'd like to see Igor having the fight, not fight less, but not have to see so much activity at net, as opposed to what the Panthers are having to deal with. But yeah, I got my ears to the ground. I'm excited about the finals coming up, and yeah, we'll catch you on the flip flop. Maybe you'll see me on those other shows. I don't know.
TBD. No earmuffs show, ears to the ground. See you later.
Yes, sir.